Otangs is a man of the people, they're killing him again. The whispers spread like wildfire. Soon voices rose through the crowd. We won't give you a coffin. If you send him away from here, you'll never find the truth. Police shields growled nervously as they tightened their hold on the front row. Secretary Park calmly observed the scene, then took out a cigarette and put it back in his pocket. He then spoke softly. It's almost dusk. Get everything sorted out before the sun sets, one way or another. Even though he was directing from outside, Secretary Park's procedures and bureaucratic coolness were chilling. He saw Yoon Tae-ho fidgeting beside Kim Min-cheol's body. The secretary quietly approached him. Mr. Tae-ho, we finally sent someone who could have been saved. It's such a shame. His eyes were wet, yet strangely understanding. Secretary Park paused, took a breath, and continued in a low voice. Hey, Tae-ho, take that car and take us to the morgue at Central Hospital. That moment was even more vivid. That day, when they covered the coffins of their comrades with a taguki and tied them tightly with white cotton string, I held the string in my own hand. The rough, tough cotton felt like it was digging into my palm, and my fingertips tingled with each pull of the knot. The white cotton string was stained with blood, but I had to tie it anyway. It was a knot that couldn't be undone. The taguki blew in the wind above the coffin. The flag, stained with blood and dust, fluttered even more that day. It felt like the cries of the souls of the dead. But we unfolded it and covered it again. It was our last courtesy, our only remaining shield. With every step we took carrying the wooden coffin, the gravel crunched beneath our feet. The sound of our heavy, shuffling footsteps echoed throughout the square. It wasn't sorrow, but the rhythm of anger. Yoon Tae-ho watched his face through a long exhale in silence. Min-cheol was one of them. He had stood before everyone else, shouting. His eyes half-closed and blood-covered, his lips still frozen, unable to utter a word. He felt the weight of the entanglement between himself and Min. Cheol, the past and present, with his whole body. Two police officers slung the body over their shoulders, and he lifted his feet and loaded it onto the truck. Just a weight like a shell left behind after the body's heat had drained away. But inside, a soul far heavier than the shell remained, more than the cold of the flesh at his fingertips. An invisible emptiness and despair weighed heavily on his heart. Yoon Tae-ho put his trembling hands in his pockets and exhaled deeply. The morgue was a space entangled with cold and silence. The stench of old corpses clung to his nostrils, and the air hung heavy, making even breathing difficult. The dim light cast the outlines of the corpses, shadows, writhing along the floor and walls. Even the sound of footsteps and breathing was absorbed into the air, fading away, and time slowed yet stretched endlessly. As the night deepened, the morgue became a space where the line between the living and the dead blurred. The illusion of someone standing there, shadows moving among the corpses, auditory hallucinations like ancient groans. When he closed his eyes, the plaza unfolded before his eyes. The moment the gun flashed and aimed, his heart pounded with fear. Yet even amidst all that, Min-cheol's kind eyes emerged. The sincerity hidden behind the smile, the gaze that remained steady. Even amidst the tension flashed through Yoon Tae-ho's mind like a light, briefly illuminating the dark, damp air of the mortuary. Min-cheol's body was no longer called by the name of Resistance. No one would remember it. Yoon Tae-ho closed his eyes for a moment and quietly prayed for the repose of his soul. Part 8, Cemetery Solidarity Exile. The cemetery was on the hill above the cathedral. The dry season's winds were parched, and the earth cracked easily. As Otens's coffin was laid, people sang. The funeral was a mixture of weeping and singing. Some clapped and sang the labor songs Otens had loved while alive, while others sobbed and leaned against the ground. Walking along the narrow path between the cemeteries, one of the priests raised his voice at the police. This is a sacred ceremony. Do not use the funeral as a tool. The police responded indifferently. Cooperation is required. It will proceed according to procedure. Another priest complained. Procedure? What in the name of God is procedure? They took the coffin without permission, and now they're holding the funeral mass. A high-ranking official approached and said quietly, Father, if you let your emotions get the better of you now, you'll only cause more chaos. Let's proceed as agreed. On one side, citizens whispered, We've been protesting all night, it's futile. Still, we should at least offer a prayer. All we can do is fold our hands and bow our heads. There's nothing we can do. As the coffin was slowly moved into the grave, a priest muttered softly, Now it's not just Otens who's buried here. It contains repressed memories, realities, and traces of the square. Everyone held their breath and bowed their heads. The weight of this vain funeral, I feel it with my whole body. The sky was dark and gloomy. People draped in black cloths and holding candles. The crowd, already numbering in the thousands. Police and soldiers surrounded the area with cold gazes from afar, their shields lined up like a wall. As a plainclothes officer approached and tried to grab his wrist, Peter quickly turned and ran into the narrow alley. "Peter, be careful, get in quickly." The car, whose interior was unseen, rolled down its window and said, "Okay, let's go to my car. The cathedral is more dangerous now. The cemetery will be safer." It was Alphonse. The car was filled with the sound of rain. The driver, still in his hands, drove through the alleys. Alphonse, in the back seat, glanced at Peter and spoke quietly. Alphonse's voice was calm, but there was a heavy regret somewhere. "As you can understand, Hortense was a thorn in our side. At the same time, she was a saint in the eyes of the people." No one fully understood that contradiction. That night, the public's immediate uprising was rejected. Peter continued, "Bastos, so she. Why did you do that?" Peter's heart pounded harder. He couldn't tell if his words were a confession or an excuse. "Yes, it was my gun. Her blood on my hand. But Hortense chose me. I'd rather die at the hands of a friend." Alphonse turned his gaze back to the road and added. He lowered his voice, fiddling with the film canister in his hand, as if sweeping it down. "Camera film. Why in this man's hands? Who else agreed to send Hortense away? Or—" Alphonse didn't nod or deny it. Instead, as if hiding the fleeting emotion in his eyes, he looked at the raindrops outside the window and answered. "She feared the disintegration of the organization. The obsession with market control pushed a hasty popular uprising. She chose it herself." Peter, with a look of incomprehension, managed to utter a single word. "She's brazenly suggesting a pardon. Is that what politics is all about? Your scenario. I was there." Alphonse remained silent for a long moment, then answered quietly, "I can't say I wrote the script. I simply read the flow and acted accordingly. As for the outcome, shouldn't each of us take responsibility in our own way?" Peter stared at his face reflected in the car window. The rain had stopped. Words intertwined with politics and conspiracy. Solidarity and betrayal flowed gently upwards across his face. His heart pounded and he cried out. Peter wanted another reassurance from him. "Fine. But the flag cannot be raised alone, but together." Alphonse, all she spoke of until the very end was federalism and a parliamentary system. "Can you walk that path with me?" Alphonse glared at him for a moment, then slowly raised the corners of his mouth. 40 years of one-man dictatorship. The system's limits had been reached. Under this system, who would be the next president? His young wife? Dim light, filtered through the thickly curtained window and the ticking of the old clock, was the only thing marking the passage of time. Alphonse sat up in his chair and looked at Peter. He turned a roll of film with his fingertips, his gaze widening as if he were pulling something out and stretching it. "Look at the United States or Germany, Peter." His voice was low and firm. "A federal state is ultimately a union of several nations. Under a common constitution, we can do the same. Yes, a one-state, two-state system. It's a way to strike a balance under a common constitution." Peter lowered his eyes for a moment, then slowly raised his head. "But that requires political will and responsibility, doesn't it? We've always blamed the system." Alphonse's lips twitched subtly. "Yes, those who advocate a parliamentary system always say that. The imperial presidency is the problem. But is the Constitution really the problem?" He drummed his fingertips on the table and continued. "Have there been any efforts to operate according to the Constitution? Rather than saying the president violated the Constitution, perhaps the politicians simply shifted the blame to the president to conceal their own incompetence?" Peter's gaze wavered. He remained silent for a moment. Alphonse's words were cold, but Peter sensed a strange sincerity within them. "Do you believe the presidential system will continue to be the right one?" Alphonse smiled. "It's not a question of right or wrong. The system itself isn't good or evil. The problem always lies in the hands of the people who operate it. No matter how excellent a structure is, if greed and evasion of responsibility take root, it will rot.